Welcome, everyone. How are you doing on this beautiful Friday? Awesome. No better place to be than right here at the Celebration of Fine Art with the fabulous artists. And today, oh, I was going to sit. Are you okay? No, that's okay. I'll just turn my head. I'll sit next to you right here. So today we have a fun panel, carefully assembled with a nice variety for heavy metal. So joining us today for our panel, your left is Ryan Schmidt, our sparkly guy, stainless steel man. And right next to him is Emily Edmonds. She's going to be talking about her techniques, yay, and Parker McDonald. So we always like to start by having the artists tell us a little bit about themselves, who they are, where they're from, how long they've been doing the art thing. And one of the reasons I assembled this group is I like the variety of, they're all metal, but they all have very different looks and very different ways of manipulating the metal to become the art form. So just start with Ryan. We're going to have you say who you are. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, my name is Ryan. How you doing? I'm from Arkansas, country boy. Grew up building playgrounds. My father had a manufacturing, basically playgrounds. We sold them and installed them. And later in the 90s, we became a rep selling and installing, but that was kind of my background. So coming out of high school, I knew art. I studied into painting, photography, ceramics, printmaking, bronze. When I realized it doesn't hold a polish, I moved into stainless. I've kind of been focused in stainless for about 22 years now.
Wonderful.
My name is Emily Brooks Edmonds. I started my career in illustration, which I still do, but I've been in the arts for about 20 years, showing my work, 7 years working in metal. And I'm from, my background is from technology and marketing. So I feel like that sometimes integrates into my work with the symmetry and the balance. And steel is my focus now. And I have a natural tendency to work in real like autumn tones. And so that is what has brought to light my interest in steel.
Hi, I'm Parker McDonald from Colorado. Been doing art as long as I can remember. Spent a lot of time painting, trying to find the right path. Always out in the woods and the fields, and a lot of years in the construction business. And then it all came together, welding metals, different metals. And so that's what I do now. I mostly do wildlife work, welded steels, branching out into some other metals, mixing it with stainless steel, a little bit of bronze, and that's where I'm at.
So I'm going to kind of bounce around here. So what I find really interesting with your work is metal is sort of a rigid, straight format, but you are able to manipulate your metals into very delicate, the birds and very delicate shapes. And you also incorporate different things, like you had the really cool flute with the birds on it. So how did you figure out that you could make this metal curve and become soft three-dimensional?
Steel doesn't want to do what you want it to do. Ryan can attest to that. But you just learn over time. You just you got to be the boss, and you got to put it in a position where it has to do what you want to do. Yeah. So, and I do like to include odd bases, different kind of bases, flutes, recycled stuff. This one is just a recycled piece of stained glass that we found, and yeah, the steel can, I was at 9/11, I was struck with, after that all happened, I remember seeing some of these giant I-beams. They were 2-foot I-beams, and they were bent into these such graceful shapes. And so steel seems really, really hard, but with the right pressure, it just kind of gives and does does what you say, you kind of get to master it.
And that you also like, do you have a love for nature and wildlife? Is that where?
Yeah, I always have. So those two things came together.
So Ryan,
Yes.
how does your work, what does it look like when you start with your raw material?
Well,
How does it get to this?
these pieces next to me started in clay. So I'm just working in Sculpey clay. It's oil-based. And this piece was a flat 2D sketch initially, just a doodle while I was on the phone. And maybe a year or two later, I went back through my notes and found this doodle. I was like, I should turn that into a sculpture. So I just took a piece of metal, a rod, kind of shifted, put it in this somewhat of a shape, but I wanted it to be interesting when you turn it around, not just a flat piece. So I ended up, adding a bunch of clay to it. And then now this piece was not a sketch. This was just a cumulative, just playing directly with clay and wire. And so I had just kind of leaving the door open for what was going to happen when you start messing with it. So actually no vision initially with this piece. It just came about. But then
So these are cast.
and these are an investment cast like a bronze. So I make a clay, then we make a mold of the clay, use the lost wax method to basically put a shell around the wax, melt the wax out of another form, and then you're pouring in liquid metal, 3,000 degrees for stainless. So these are solid pours. And this piece took me about 5 years to make the first one. This one was about 4 years to get that and a whole process from start to finish. Then I also work in sheet metal, and like Mr. Parker, and it's a whole different thing. You are kind of limited to some degree how far you can stretch it and pull it without a kink or trying to get a fluid movement. So I'm taking these two flat pieces of metal, kind of tacking the inside curve together with a welder, and then putting tension inside the curve with straps and clamps, and open these forms up into a triangular form from the two flat planes. And afterwards, I can show you guys at my workspace. I got a couple of pieces I'm starting, so I can kind of see that in person. But these are cast, and then I do the sheet metal. So
good. And Emily, and oh, by the way, we have a renovated outdoor workspace for so many of our artists that sometimes can be a little noisy with what they do. And so we had to contain them. So we got containers to contain all the excitement. And so they all have some workspace out there, which is kind of fun to see. They used to go in the back parking lot, but Emily, I love the assemblage work. I mean, you're known for sort of the abstract using, not patina. Take it from there.
It is essentially a patina, an oxidation. But like Ryan was saying, I start first with flat sheet metal. So my first step is to head down to the steel yard and confuse every man that works at the yard as to why I'm there. I am like one of the only girls that comes and buys metal, and it's hysterical every time. I get a lot of compliments from the different companies I work with, and they tell me regularly, we need more women in steel. We need more women coming down here and doing what you do. So I start with flat sheet metal, and then I'm cutting and forming it. If you can see that it's layered. And so I'm using a shearer, large shears to cut large pieces, small shears like this one on the table here to cut smaller pieces. And I create each piece individually and oxidize it, paint it, and work back and forth in a process that naturalizes the pieces, and then assemble them in the end. So I know I have a target idea, but I try and make them also different and unique, that the end result has a lot of movement and is very individual. Then in this piece here, the tree is left raw steel, and I paint all of the silhouette, leaving that metal raw, and then allowing that to oxidize. And in the oxidizing process, it's giving you these really natural veins that lend to looking like limbs and leaves and sunlight coming through the piece. So I essentially use the oxidation of the metal like as a part of my palette. And so it's that element that I feel like gives it this really grounded and natural appeal. So I'm essentially painting with rust in a lot of ways.
That's so cool. And I love that, you are a woman representing all of us in the steel world. I had to go get some piece of steel. Where did I go? Industrial Metals. Have you been there?
Okay, so I haven't been to all of the places here, but Trevor, who is not here, was so kind to let me know that it was going to be like Christmas when I went, and so to make sure I had like extra money, because that's, you know, like a lot of artists, they go to an art supply store, and I go to those too, obviously, and that's like Christmas for them. But when you see all of the metals and the different rods, the flat sheets, and you know, all the angle iron, it just, my mind just opens up, and you just think of all these things that you can cultivate with steel. And so that's my happy place, you know.
That is so cool. And we're going to pass this around, but when I went down there, I thought I needed like a 7/8 inch something. And he goes, oh, it's 11 gauge or 10. So I learned something new. And the higher the number, the thinner the gauge. Higher the number, the thinner the piece is. So, and it's very heavy. I only bought like a 2x4 foot piece, and I was like, can you help me carry this? So, but let's pass this around because it shows a little bit of both the oxidization and the assemblage. And your machine over here, people might have to come look at it later, but it's quite fascinating.
So that's called a guillotine shear. So that's exactly how it works. It chops, you know, metal or fingers. Yeah. And it's a really powerful tool. It's very unique because it's so small. A lot of the tools that we use are cumbersome and pretty large. I think that's the nature of working in steel. And so this little gem has been lucky to come with me so that in my studio in the day, I can work and get the smaller pieces cut and placed. And then I do the heavy lifting of my work in the morning and at night so that, you know, I don't disrupt your lunch in the afternoon with loud noises and things.
Good, thank you. So Parker, with your work, how do you get it to be rusty or different colors?
So my favorite material is a weathering steel, Core 10. A lot of you probably know that. So it's an alloy that has some nickel in it and some things like that. It's almost like a rusting stainless steel, but it's engineered to be outside and get an initial layer of rust and then not rust away. So my favorite way is just to finish them and put them outside. Yeah, sometimes if, you know, if there's a show coming up, I'll use a little acid to get it kicked off sooner, but the best way is just to put it outside. Love it.
And do you do cast work? I think you do.
I do a little bit. So the little birds are just, they take forever to build one at a time. So I got to where I was casting some of the parts, like on the little stuff, which let me address some a wider variety of price ranges. So the smaller stuff, the little birds, there's some cast parts, and then I go ahead and finish it the way I usually do. The big stuff is always just cut and hammer and weld.
It's great. And you have a nice variety in the sculpture garden, including, is that a scorpion out there this year?
Yeah, scorpion.
And what else do you have out there that people need to see?
There's a roadrunner. There's a great big lizard in a pretty interesting pose. I brought an agave century plant that's 12 feet tall. It's got an owl in it. What else is out there? There's a frog, stuff like that.
I'm going to be interested to see who buys a scorpion. So, and do you remember when it snowed down in Florida recently?
Yeah.
Didn't the iguanas fall out of the trees? Because
Did see
Yeah.
that, yeah.
have you guys heard about that? they're not supposed to be cold. They can't deal with cold. They're fine when it warms up, but
That's what happens when you give a glass beer. They fall out of the trees.
so, but I find it interesting what inspires artists to select their subject matter because, you know, of all the things you can paint or draw, each artist has a different, you know, like Emily, you are in the abstract world, but with earth tones, which gives it a real rich feeling. And then, our Mr. Hollywood down there, you are all about the shiny. So contrasted to Parker, what happens to get that polish and that shine?
A lot of sanding. It's kind of like auto body finishing. So I'm gonna go through 80 or 100 grit sandpaper, you know, 150, 180, 220, 320, 400, 600, 800. And then a series of buffing wheels with different rouges that are coarse to fine. But initially what it does is it seals the metal. So to some degree, it'll last that way for some time. So,
Does it ever need repolishing?
you know, I would say, yeah, but maybe 5 or 10 years later for, you know, refinish kind of.
And tell us about some of your most intriguing projects that you've done.
Well, I'd say the largest piece that I have in the yard, it's called Ascension. It's a 15-foot piece. It was initially built for Beverly Hills Centennial Celebration 2014. Loaned it to the city for a year, got it back, took it to Michigan, sold some work with it there from off an art prize competition, and was in Miami for about 5 years on lease, withstood Hurricane Irma. So it's got some battle scars from stuff flying in the air and hitting it, but that's probably the one that's traveled the most so far.
And don't you have a piece of the governor's mansion?
I do. It's a 8-foot scale of this suspended teardrop piece. So imagine an 8-foot teardrop or raindrop rather, and built a 20-foot by 8-foot cantilevered arch that holds this thing over a pool of water. It's at the governor's mansion in Arkansas.
And you require a lot of equipment when you do your installs.
Yeah, and a lot of hands.
You need a lot of hands, yeah, yeah. I know some people who've been on a few installs with you. I heard a story about putting something up above fireplace or
Yeah. Well, some of the pieces are pretty heavy, so it's, you know, trying to, you know, carry 150 pounds up a ladder, and you need 2 people and 2 ladders and, you know, a good footing.
and your work can be great indoors or outdoors.
Absolutely.
And is there one installation now that you just like feel like it just represents exactly the feel you want? Or is there too many to count?
Well, it's important to place them in the right situation. I just installed a smaller one of these pieces in PV, a hanging piece, and it was nice because it was in overhang, so it's not in direct sunlight, and it's out of the weather. So I feel like that was the latest win, and there was a hook already in the ceiling, so all I had to do was hang it.
Okay, so Emily, you started off in engineering kind of work, or what did you?
I started off in illustrative work.
Illustrative, okay.
And I still do a bit of that. I'm a busy bee and I can't sit still. And so most of the time you'll see me here standing up, working on something. And I work in multiple mediums, which has really been and it has given me an advantage, I feel like, as I'm working in the steel to integrate some of those ideas that I've cultivated in other mediums. So as far as like, say, a unique piece, I'm currently starting a piece for a collector in Park City, and it's on steel, but we are capturing the oxidation of the piece. And I will be creating a work that is supposed to capture snowfall with a kind of a lavender influence. So I feel like together with my illustrative background and even some of the work that I've done in clay, I'm able to take my work with steel into kind of territory. And yeah, and so all those mediums come together in the end. And you can see that piece. I'll be working on them on here and see if I manage to pull it off. So
How much control do you have over the oxidation?
I've learned over time to control it pretty well. And I have learned to stop that element and capture it. I've also learned to take that element and, like I said, use it as a paintbrush. And the way that I'm doing that, one of the things that I'm doing in my abstracts is that I go through a layering process of painting incorporating my painting, oxidizing the metal, and then using what I call a water wash to when the oxidation is dried, then I flush my pieces and allow that particulate to integrate into the piece, and then start that process again. So all of the light layering comes together as a beautiful gradient. And it's very time consuming. You'll see me standing around just looking at it, contemplating, but mostly I'm waiting for everything to dry so that I can take the next step. So I'm watching water dry regularly, and I watch paint dry all the time. And I have to just be very patient. But as they say, good things come to those who wait. And if I take all those steps, I feel like it comes together with a unity in oxidation that is not common for that process.
Very good. And what's the biggest piece you've ever done?
The biggest piece is an 8x12, and it gets very physical because my process is very tactile, and I'm also moving the piece a lot. So it's it's a labor of love to move the piece around and get the effects that I want. So, you know, when I'm making very large pieces, I don't have to go to the gym.
Hidden advantage, yes. And you do also, like, this is part of a triptych, or?
So this is part of a series. And this is another unique factor about the oxidation, is that I make a lot of pieces in triptychs or in groupings because oxidation is variable based on humidity in the air. And so if you like a piece, it's very difficult for me to recreate that oxidation. And sometimes I'll have to wait until the time of year. That's the closest I've got. I'll wait till the time of year that it was created before. So my oxidation in January in Salt Lake is very different than my oxidation, say, in June in Phoenix. So humidity really plays a very strong role in those colors.
And do you, like Parker, you use a product that stops the oxidation at some point? Do you do the same, like control it?
So the water stops my process, and then all of my pieces are, when they're finished, they're clear coated. I treat them a lot like say you would treat a metal door on the front of your house, and so it ends up coated. And that can, you know, that can actually change. I don't have that very often, but it is possible for a piece to continue becoming beautiful. And most people are okay with that, but a clear coat will stop that. And in the case of copper, baking soda will stop that.
Oh, so chemistry.
It'll neutralize the metal.
Chemistry is involved in all this. Okay. Parker, do you have a favorite install of a piece that you've done? Or do you love them all equally?
I did a commission. It was a twice life-size elk, so it was about 14 feet tall, and it's greets people at the entrance of a guy's ranch in southern Wyoming, and I guess that was my biggest, most favorite piece.
I have that picture. Yes, that's a great picture.
That was Corten.
Corten? And how long did that take you?
About 6 months.
How did you, I'm going to have a question here in a minute. How did you, okay, this you cut out multiple pieces of sheet
Right.
metal.
So I have a plasma cutter, which is an electric cutting torch. So I'm starting with sheet metal, like everybody here. 14 gauge usually, something like that, and cutting out pieces and hammer it around into shape and wrestle with it and bend it where I want it to be and weld it together.
Do you start like with a substrate, like a foam, styrofoam?
No,
You're just
no.
putting it all together.
Yep, just putting it all together. So, you know, it seldom fits the first time, so there's a fitting element, you know, you try and cut and try again and sometimes throw it away and start over and yeah. And then of course, if sometimes you'll get far enough along where the head is wrong and that just gets torched off and you start over.
How nice that you can do that.
Yeah.
And then but everything's welded, no nails or screws or.
Not on the pieces themselves. They're all welded. Sometimes to attach it to something else, like a lot of them get attached to a rock. I'll do little things that are like almost like a little mini diorama where there's a base and a cactus and a rock and then the subject. So that all has to get attached some way.
You have a question?
How many times has that big elk been shot?
I don't think it has, but that would be interesting if it did. It's pretty big. It would be fun to do one life size and put it on the side of the road and it would definitely get
See how
shot.
many bullet holes it gets,
Right.
yeah. Or how many people it scares. Like,
Right.
I think you should do a grizzly bear.
Have a grizzly bear on my website, parkermcdonald.com. There's one in downtown Longmont, which is my hometown. She was about 10 feet tall standing up, and that one's on the street downtown in Longmont.
We need a bear.
Yeah,
Let's make us a bear.
all right.
So, okay, so of all the materials you could have picked, why were each of you attracted to metal versus, something lighter weight and easier to work with?
It withstands weather and it's industrial. Well, I did do a cast of aluminum. It fell over twice and broke each time. So that was the only time I did aluminum.
So you like the sturdiness. And what can you share about your one of your biggest inspirations in the shape of your work?
Well, I like the idea of fluid movement, curves. The cast is one angle, but in sheet metal, probably the earliest inspiration would be Eero Saarinen's Gateway Jefferson Memorial in St. Louis. 630 feet tall. It's triangular. I kind of did a study on it. Been up in it multiple times, and matter of fact, I have the printed verbal description of the build. But it wasn't stretched into form. It was equilateral pieces that were assembled. So there still has this structural integrity of the triangle, but so I tried to go about it stretching the metal rather than assembling 3 equilateral triangle pieces. And what I'm doing is I'm sketching a fluid curve and tacking the inside of the curve, to the piece behind it, and then putting tension on it. And when it pulls into position, it gets a compound bend on these 2 curves, and that creates a distortion in the reflection. And it's a lot of fun playing with a distorted reflection, I guess, bubbling effect, or makes you look different when you walk in front of it.
We have lots of people take photos in front of the reflection. Oh, I forgot. It's really important too.
How about the arch?
The arch, what is it about the triangle structure that is so solid?
Just the strength of it, really.
Okay. And I know you were influenced by that, but I love that you are not tacking pieces together. You're manipulating the metal into that shape. How important is
I do, yeah, well, I do try to put one complete piece on a full sheet of metal. So I'll maximize a sheet of metal and I try not to put any seams on it, on the face. So if you look at this hanging piece here, there's 3 legs to that raindrop, and each leg is composed of 3 pieces of metal, and each curve is one solid. Each curved piece is one flat sheet. So if I were to put a seam in there and then stretch it, you would see it. It would bubble. It wouldn't look right. So trying to keep it the fluid movement.
And then how important is the heat, the temperature?
I'm doing a brute force pull with clamps and straps, so there's not really heat involved in the stretch on these forms. If you're referring to the cast pieces, it's the 3,000 degrees. Those are hot.
So, and people can come out to your end of the container
I'm
world
facing Hayden. Got some aluminum truss up around with some shade
for
structure.
shade, yes, not a stage. Although,
It is a working stage.
although you can be entertained, yes, very good. And then what do you think people would be most surprised about, you know, how you do what you do, and are there secrets that we
I
don't
don't,
know about?
I mean, I don't really know anybody else that's stretching it like I'm doing in this particular way. So I feel like I'm pretty unique in the way I'm coming about the triangular form to stretch from flat into, 3D.
Emily, what do you think people would be, I mean, what secrets, besides that you have a guillotine? And if anybody misbehaves, we know where to send them.
Well, I just think that most people are surprised that a woman is working in steel. I get that a lot. And I think that what they think about most is the weight. So a lot of people ask me how do you carry all of this around? How do you do this? And women are strong and we're determined. So I never give up. I very seldom ask for help, and I just use that brute force and figure it out, or navigate a way to do what I need to do. So I think it's just mostly that a woman's doing it, and I don't understand that. But I guess, steel is strong, it's bold, it does kick back, and we fight, and I lose sometimes, and sometimes it loses too. And I feel like that's kind of like a woman's life. Like we have to fight a little harder. And so it's just the medium is what surprises people. So I hear all the time, how do you get this here? And I do it like anyone else. I use a dolly and I pick it up and I move it. But I will say one of the wonderful things about being at Celebration is that you have somebody to work with and ask a lot of questions. And Parker is like, he is the man for all the answers in my world. And I tell him to write it down, $1 a question or whatever. And he so patiently answers questions about tools and techniques, and encourages me in ways to move my craft forward. So even though I am a woman fighting in a man's world, I love working with the gentlemen here, and all of the information that they have to impart is so kind and so helpful. So it really is one of the really sweet spots of this environment that Susan has created. Yeah.
Well, I learned everything I needed to know about Emily last year when it was we had a last minute cancellation, and right about that time I heard from Emily asking if we had any spaces, and I was like, well, if you can get here in 3 days, yes. And she showed up, and it was amazing. And you can tell about people by their actions, not their words. And it was first year, and artists are allowed to start setting up the Saturday before we open. And I always like the new artists to be here, early, like on Saturday or Sunday. Well, I think it was Wednesday they rolled in, and I'm like, oh my God, you got to paint your wall. And her husband was looking at me like, what are you talking about? But they made it happen, and it was so impressive. And I love people that have that can-do attitude.
So we were in Las Vegas, and she's texting. Susan's like, are you here yet? You're going to need to build a wall. And I was like, oh, we're almost there. We're almost there. We'll be there soon. And we had no idea what we were we were gonna do. We didn't know about the setup. I mean, it really was days. And I just believe where there's a will, there's a way. And to just eh, have faith, think, be patient, and it'll happen. And so it'll get done. And so that's what we just kept telling her. It'll get done. Well, don't worry.
Hey, that's our,
It'll all come together.
we're getting there. We're getting there. That's our motto, right? We're getting there. But I love that about Emily, and she was here every single day, working every single day, and true testament to dedication. And we love that. And we did do a little dumpster diving and stuff to get some materials that year. And we talked about dumpster diving last week too, but you can find good things there many times. So, but again, it was a testament to the community here too, how many people pitched in and helped. And the way that people mentor each other around here is pretty astounding. And tell us about your experience arriving here and wondering what the heck have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, what the heck have I gotten myself into? Of course, every time I've come, there's been trailer breakdowns. So 3 years straight, that just comes with it. You just learn a little bit more every time. Everybody says the community here is so great that once you get here, you're just all wrapped up and you can do it. You feel like you can do it.
There's a lot of help here. And yeah, trailer, every year we have at least a couple of artists. So whose axle broke or whose hitch didn't work or, there's always something. So,
Of course, we're hauling heavy stuff, rocks and steel, and pretty hard on trailers
And
sometimes.
sometimes we're overloaded.
sometimes,
Sometimes.
I don't know if it was the first or second year moving some stuff. Had 5 flats in between here in Arkansas. And what was happening was when I would hit a large enough hole, it would crack the rim because I was overloaded.
did you get a bigger trailer after that? No.
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 Which is let's wait.
Well, here's the thing that a lot of people don't think about the life of an artist. There's a whole lot below the surface that you never think about. I mean, the road warrior aspect of hauling back and forth and back and forth. And Ryan's gone like every 5 minutes. I'm like, where are you going now? And because he's going to get the truck, or you have a place in Grand Rapids, so you're bringing inventory back and forth. And there again, I think it just speaks to the dedication to the lifestyle that all of you have chosen. And you could be sitting at a desk or driving a construction truck, but you chose the art route, which is there's a lot to
Quite a lot goes wrong.
I think there's something important to say about that, though, is that artists have a special thing within them. And I feel like musicians have that as well, poets, but in the arts, it's like you have to let it out. It's there. It's nagging at us. It's pushing us to create. And so it really is healthiest and safest for all of you if you just let us make art. So we have to do it. And you'll meet an artist that maybe creates sculpture, but when they cook, they make beautiful food, or they frost a cake so beautifully. And so it comes out in a lot of ways, but it's a part of our core that we have to exercise. And that's why we're so determined to go to places where we can show you what we've created, because it really is that powerful, and it is part of our being.
It's like a release, like you got to do it. It's something that's got to get out. Yeah.
And it's not always good, okay? It's not. But we strive to make as much of it good as possible.
This is how we learn things.
Yeah, exactly. There are no mistakes. But yeah, it's a calling. And when you embrace that and know that that is your purpose, you can walk through fire, right?
Or create with fire.
Or create with fire. I was waiting for somebody to pick up on that. Thank you. Yeah, Ryan's usually the one dropping the puns, but yeah. And again, I love to watch how the artists all interact with each other. And I didn't really think about it till earlier in the day. I was walking back to check with Parker and Emily to see if they're ready. And I'm walking past Trevor Swanson, who paints on metal, and Michael McCrae, jeweler, who now has started doing wall pieces with metal, very different. I'm like, wow, this is the metal department over here. And then there's Caleb, Caleb's piece was in the promo piece. But I love that it's also different. Like, just same thing with our painters. You know, you walk through and we've got many painters, but all doing something completely different, and seeing that creativity come to life is pretty exciting. Do we have questions from our wonderful audience that usually has great things? Yeah. There's one online? Okay.
There's a couple from online, but one for each of you, do you have a favorite tool? Maybe yours is the guillotine, but
Plasma cutters, welders, hammers, anvils. Yeah, big long list of, I guess I don't know if I could pick a favorite. I couldn't do it without the welder. So. 4?
I think my favorite tool, I use a compressor and grind the metal, finish it. It's a method I use to make sure that like my painting is adhering. So it's just, it makes my life so easy. So I'm constantly wielding like an air compressed grinder.
I'd call it a tool. I use it on a projector for getting on proportion for everything, and of course I'm re-sketching basically my sketch on flat sheet metal, but that's probably what I couldn't do without. Yeah, it's old school, but that's the closest thing to a computer that I use.
Angle grinders, hugely versatile. I have about set up all the time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
A drill. I have like a favorite drill, even though it's just like all the other drills. And the airport tried to tell me I can't have it the other day. And I was like, I told him, I said, I'm a metal artist. I'm not abandoning the drill. Because he was like, you should abandon the drill and then you can hop on your flight earlier. And I waited 6 hours because I wouldn't abandon my $80 drill.
You should show me this.
the other question was on installations, particularly wall or ceiling. Do you guys just with the weight of it, do you have to know what's behind the wall or ceiling
Or
before?
build a wall or build a concrete footing for detail. Yeah, it's very significant to the property.
My pieces don't get that heavy. I do occasionally get a commission where we're putting it on a beam and they'll tell me that I can do whatever I want, and then it doesn't matter. But I work hard to make my pieces wall like basically the weight of any other piece that's framed. So I mount a lot of my steel on wood or on canvas bases so that they're nice and light for you to hang.
Public installations, sometimes you need engineer drawings, and engineer has to figure out footings and even bigger stuff like that.
And then if it falls over, it's not on the artist, it's on the engineer.
Anybody else have questions? I do think, tools of the trade are really important, and that's another a fun thing. Sometimes we do little posts showing different people's palettes and paintbrushes, like Trevor Swanson with his 9,000 paintbrushes that each of them have a name and get bathed every night. And it's important to take good care of your tools, and that I have a pink drill. It's little. Doug bought it for me. Yeah, so I can hang stuff in the office. But did you actually get on the airplane with the drill?
I have so many airplane stories. I waited and then I had to recheck the bag. So I waited 6 hours, then I had to recheck the bag. And I felt totally justified. It was like leaving a child behind. And I have another airport story. All of last year, I fly a lot, and I'll fly down to look at a wall at somebody's house. And I get stopped. I was getting stopped all the time. And I'd go off and they'd have to come over and they'd look at me sinisterly and scan my body and let me go. And it probably happened 6 or 7 times when I realized I work up until the minute I leave. And so I'll just run out and grind a piece of metal and I'm sending just teeny little bits of steel into my clothes.
Metal shavings.
And I get there and they think I'm like, like I'm have some weapon or something. So yeah. It's,
Or if you do epoxy and don't change your clothes from anchor epoxy and installing, mounting a piece, basically that'll set off all kinds of stuff, and then they think you're like making bombs or something.
The perils of an artist's life. Yeah. I set off alarms in airports too, but
I had to go to Tijuana to pick up a sculpture from a guy that was showing it to some people. His wife was there, couldn't come to the US, so he's worked in San Diego, lived in Tijuana back and forth every day. He had brought one of my pieces to go show one of his bosses for something, and I needed it for a flight. I was getting ready to go out of the country, and I was taking it with me. I had to come back across the border with this piece, and the fact that I went down, got it, and came right back, well, I could really confuse Border Patrol, and they had me hemmed up for about 6 hours, 13 different interviews to get. That would have been 2011. I was getting ready to go to Dubai. I brought the piece and gave it to the royal family in Jordan.
how'd that happen?
Through the dentist. So my friend was Jordanian. He hosted, my wife and I went with a group of our friends to Jordan, and I got to see all the tourist sites, and we had some dental work done because it's an eighth of the cost there in Jordan than it is in the US. And so we were out there, and the dentist that my friend that was hosting us, well, is the royal family's dentist. So through the dentist, I was able to give them a piece. And by the time I made it home, I had a courier service letter from Their Majesty's Palace thanking me for their piece. So that was cool.
Wow. Huh. Who knew? It's not what you know, it's who you know, I guess, right? So I think it's just very kind of all of you to share your stories and your talent with all of us. And do you have often we talk about asking yourself in the morning, what's the best that can happen? And at the end of the day, say, what's the best thing that happened today? Is there like a best story from the Celebration of Fine Art so far?
The community mostly, and this is only year 3 for me, so I'm building some clientele, but mostly it's the people that you get to meet.
And the family.
Yeah, family.
when I first got here, Aki, I'm sure you all know him, he's like one of the Red Aprons. He walked right up to me and he said, "Kid, the minute you walked in under this tent, you're part of a family." And I absolutely agree that that is the kind of unity that we have here. It's very stressful for 10 weeks and we're like, I'm away from home and the only one here. And so it takes its toll and people are very kind and we have a lot of lovely patrons that come to meet new people and are gracious. And, you know, it really makes you feel at home when you're away from home. And I don't know if people realize that 10 weeks is a long time to commit to your art. And the kindnesses over that 10 weeks really help make that come together.
Yeah, I mean, the people that come through here just really are amazing. And I would say it completes the magic when the patrons get here because they bring that energy and that kindness to us. And
Oh, I want to say real quick, it's the only show where your fellow artists will turn to you and say, "Are you okay?" Because it's so, you know, we're going through a lot and ups and downs. And I turned to Dan Romero and he said that the other day. And I said, this is the only show that somebody would really heartfelt look at you and say, "Are you okay?" Because it's emotional. And I know we all had colds at one time and we were all here in the tent working. And so caring for your fellow artist is something that Susan has cultivated and it's very powerful. and necessary for, I know for the new people and for me.
Good. Well, that's why we always say, we jury for kindness. You will not be invited back if you are not a contributing kind human being, for sure. And that is part of the magic sauce here, I think. And I feel it from our patrons, you know, the same thing. So there is a little magic here. So, all right. Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you that you're dying to share?
Earlier, when you asked why we chose this difficult, hard medium, a memory came back to me, probably a teenager and looking through a National Geographic and an article on Greece. And they were cutting a road through the side of a hill with a bulldozer and pull up this bronze sculpture that had been lost to history. And that kind of longevity has just stuck with me, that I could make something that's around thousands of years from now. Ryan's stuff will be here for thousands of years. And that permanency is just really part of why I work with what I do.
And sculpture for me is so important in you experience it in a three-dimensional way instead of just looking at a flat item. Although interesting, last week we were talking about portraiture, and I love what Tina Garrett said about a painter is translating a three-dimensional thing into a two-dimensional. So that both sides of that coin are very interesting to see how you get there, you know, when you're working in 3D. But the idea of, go ahead.
So I think this is easier. You have to go through some mental gymnastics to take an actual object and flatten it down to 2 dimensions. I get to just build what actually is. Easier, I think.
True. And it's a way for people to experience it when we think about public sculpture and public art around the country, around the world. It allows people to experience a place and a time and capture that feeling. And again, the permanence of it. I'm on the board with the National Sculpture Society, and it's been really exciting to learn from so many sculptors there and about the history and to see installations and how people can go and experience that, and how important that is in defining a sense of place. And I always love to be involved in the public process when they're selecting art, and we need more art in Scottsdale. We have lots of great art here, public art, but we need more. So yeah, but okay, any last questions for the day? You guys have been a very quiet audience. We've had some extra airplane activity flying over for the open, so we heard that. But we are so grateful to each of you for being here with us and learning from our fabulous panel today. Ryan Schmidt, who's down at the north tent at the far end, and also out in the container land, and Emily Edmonds and Parker McDonald, who are both on the south tent near the end. We do encourage you to go and experience and see the rest of their work up close and personal. You want to get a closer look at the guillotine, feel free, just keep your fingers out of it. And
If you want a manicure or a pedicure, for sure. With
So-
precision, of course, yeah.
But thank you all for being here. And next week we have another exciting installment of Art Discovery, and I can't remember what it is, but it'll be fabulous. So we'll see you then.